So to start board right now, the first presentation was titled "All the Important Stuff Done in Concept Essay," and this is with Alex Morrow and Drew Henry from the Mops and Moes podcast. So today they'll dive into some crucial conversations that are frequently missed in the military humans and performance conversations. So what does that actually do? Why do stakeholders listen to outside more than their own teams? And they'll provide answers to these questions and practical strategies for addressing these and other common challenges. So I'll turn it over to Alex and Drew.
That's very fast. We're gonna go fast too.
We don't have a lot of time. So I do think we want to go fast and ideally like have discussions with you guys. We tried to do that at Fort Benning and like no one raised their hand. Hopefully we're amongst friends today. So anyway, we'll get right into it.
I'm Alex Morrow. We have all of our many roles up there. In both cases, we are speaking in the Mops and Moes role, which is slightly ironic, and we'll talk about why. But my H2F affiliation is through the Army Reserve, currently working with Detachment 201. In my day job as a civilian, I work with the Space Force doing their version of H2F, which is called the Holistic Health Approach, or HHA. Everybody's got to have their own special acronym. And then for Mops and Moes, also an acronym. Yeah.
And I'm Drew. I am the other half of this circus. And I also work as an H2F director for 44th Med Brigade down at Fort Bragg.
So we are not speaking in our official capacities today. We're not. It's very important.
So some of this is review. I think we did give a version of this conversation at Fort Benning. Like I said, we released this as a podcast, but where we wanted to go first with this was just getting into what we call our core four. I don't know what that story, what that even means.
I mean, there's a fourth of the core joke built in there, but we're skipping it for time.
We're skipping it. So the first one of these is Goodhart's law. You guys have probably heard about this before, but it's this idea that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure, right? And another way to think about that is that metrics lose value when you start to optimize for a score instead of the outcome, right? I think, geez, there's a lot of you guys so funny. This is most, I think, prescient when we think about something like the AFC, right? If it's designed to measure lethality or readiness, but when we start to incentivize performance, what do soldiers start to do? They start to, I don't want to use the word manipulate, right? But they start to manipulate the system so that they can optimize that outcome. And just by a quick show of hands, because I think this will be kind of fun. Does anybody know somebody who has got a perfect score on the AFT, but is not a very resilient human being? Right. So there are more of you guys than that, but those of you that raised your hand, thank you. Again, the idea there is not that we don't want to measure things, right? But it's that we want to measure what matters, not confusing that measurement for the mission itself or what the test or the metric is designed to show in the first place. Cool. That's right. Thank you. More of that, please.
Next one's McNamara's Fallacy. This is the second of our core four. I will let you guys read what's up there. I will say, to clarify something that happened a little earlier this morning, I don't submit questions anonymously. I was not attach my name to the questions I submit. And I was the one who submitted the question about things that matter in H2F that are non-readily measurable. I was not the one who submitted the Apex question this morning. But I think you guys might have seen in the response from Mr. Bell, who I think spoke to a lot of really important things and is driving the WPO project forward at the Department of War level in a way that's really, really beneficial. But I'm willing to go on record and say I disagree with his answer that he gave to our question earlier, because he was essentially playing out McNamara's Fallacy live on stage. Like, only measurable things matter. If it matters, we have to measure it. If we can't measure it, it's probably not that important, right? That literally happened on stage earlier today. We've seen this play out from Vietnam through the global war on terror, thinking if we count the number of bad guys in body bags, it's going to tell us something about how the war effort's going. It turns out when your goal is stable governance, no amount of bad guys in body bags can get you closer to that. That's foundational to the Mops and Moes concept. I also think McNamara's Fallacy is the reason we end up treating the physical domain as the primary domain of something like H2F, because it is so readily quantifiable. I can time your 2-mile run. I can measure your waist. I can track your push-ups. I can do all these things. It gets a lot harder if we want to measure sleep. It gets a little even harder than that if we want to measure spiritual. I can ask you guys what your spiritual score out of 100 is, right? That's a tough question to answer. Just because it's hard to quantify does not mean it's important. Yes, there are reasons we may want to quantify it for research purposes or monitoring purposes, but it's also okay to admit that some of the most important things are hard, if not quantified, and we can still work on them even if we can't measure them.
Alex talks more than I do. So, although having said that, one of these is named after me. So I don't think I made this up, but I said it enough to where we just started putting my name on it. And then when we breathed it, we put a picture of me lifting a rock from that. It's very heavy rocks, guys. I did this a bit as well, but just show of hands, have you heard this phrase, what gets measured gets managed? Nods are fine too. No one didn't raise their hand. And I think that's true, but everybody in this room recognizes that human performance is built on these like critical infrastructure type variables that don't necessarily lend themselves to very clean quantification, right? So you add this corollary to it, and we corrected the spelling because we spelled it wrong. And it's what needs managing isn't always measurable, right? And I think the trap that we fall into is that we start to excessively rely on things like dashboards. They start to create this illusion of certainty because there's data that we can attach to things. But when we look at what really matters to human performance, it's things like trust, cohesion, sense of self, sense of purpose. I mean, spirituality touches on a little bit of this, but even in that case, we're still trying to quantify things. I think the fallacy here is mistaking data visibility for operational importance, right? That's not to say that data that's visible isn't operationally important, but just because you can't easily quantify it, that doesn't mean that it's any less important than what you can see. And I think an interesting way to look at this, and maybe this is like the corollary to the corollary, right, is that we've acknowledged just now that not everything that matters can be measured, but I would also posit that not everything that we can measure actually matters. And so as you guys are out there kind of designing your own systems, and as we talk about tech and software and wearables and metrics and blah, 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 don't forget that at the end of the day, if your soldiers don't like you, they're not going to do the thing, right? And you can put all the wearables you want on them. If they don't think you're a cool dude or a cool gal, they're just not going to show up. And I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that. And again, I did not make this up. We use my name, but feel free to go forth and use that.
A fast question before we dive into Nazareth Syndrome. Of all the professions on an H2F performance team, which one is like the beating heart with like the most soldier interaction and most personal impact?
Physical therapist.
I heard some physical therapists say physical therapists. It's what I heard a lot of people say. Strength and conditioning program. If you said strength and conditioning coach, I agree with you. I think it's fundamentally a coaching program with some medical pieces that are part of it, right? With that in mind, how many H2F strength and conditioning coaches are presenting at this symposium?
Nice. I have a CSCS. So
the answer is none. There are some people who have CSCSs that are presenting. None of them are currently coaches. They're in program director roles or other roles. And I think that speaks pretty directly to Nazareth Syndrome. We are more prone to listening to outsiders than we are to the people that are doing the thing every day, right? If H2F succeeded in preventing some harmful behaviors or outcomes, it is in large part because coaches got people to train better, and none of them are here. If they are here, I believe they were told by their employers that they had to take PTO to be here. This is not considered part of the job for them if they are attending. So what Nazareth Syndrome is, it is biblical in its origins. The one place Jesus went when he was preaching his message where he was not received well was his own hometown. Because they said, that's just the carpenter. Why would we listen to him? Right? And that is human nature. We are more likely to be receptive to a message when it comes from someone outside where we don't know the messiness of the actual implementation. And we just have to be aware of that as part of human nature, right? When I leave here on Friday and go back to my day job, I have to deal with the reality of training schedules and limited resources and competing demands and all sorts of things that make it hard. And that doesn't mean, like, that's why you guys are going to listen to me when I go back there. I'm just the guy in the unit that they know. I'm a lot more special as a podcaster for some reason than I am in the job the government pays me to do.
It's not
that is the phenomenon. I would tell you to be aware of it, understand it, accept it, be on the watch for it, but also potentially leverage it, right? Bring people that are outsiders that can share messages you've had a hard time getting across because your organization might be more receptive to that outsider than they are to you.
very tough to deal with this. Yeah. We get it. So kind of moving on from the core four, this is new material, guys. These are, I don't know what you call these, just statements, I guess, through lines that have come up. And the more we've talked to people kind of all over the place. And this kind of goes without saying, right? Data doesn't do anything. People use data to do things. even though for some reason we all kind of worship at the altar of data these days. I think the take home thought here is this discussion between being data driven versus data informed, right? And there is a difference in that, as much as folks might not necessarily think. Being data driven is when you start to kind of outsource the decision making to the dashboard or the wearable or the metrics. The other side, being data informed, is when you allow your systems to use data to help make decisions, right? So the data becomes one input among many inputs. And we talked about this a little bit with the corollary slide, but things like experience, context, just longitudinal observation, athlete feedback. Like, heaven forbid we ask our athletes like what their thoughts are on the things that we're doing. And again, I think this echoes a point that we made earlier, but human performance, like it's far too complex to try and narrow it down to a single score, right? Or a survey or an output. And that's not to knock any of the kind of organizations out there that have a score that they give you. But if that starts to drive your decision-making process, then I think, in my opinion, you've kind of fallen off the wagon a bit in terms of where that's truly meant to sit in the broader human performance conversation. And one point I know we wanted to make, because I think it's relevant to everything going on this week, is that before we asked ourselves how to collect more data, right? We should ask whether we're actually leveraging the data that we have right now to make human decisions. And some of us are, we're doing it quite well, but we're also trying to onboard more and more things. It's like, are we really maximizing what we have in front of us yet? I don't have the answer to that question. I'm just throwing it out there since there's so many of them in here.
Drew made me change this slide like a week ago. Didn't want to get fired. And you can only take a picture of what's on the slide. I guess this is getting recorded, so you might like snip me saying the font. But I'm gonna say what we had on the slide before, and I say this with love to a couple people who were in the audience. I'm looking around the room. I'm looking at them right now. This is us not speaking in our professional capacity. This is to many organizations, and this is just me making a personal recommendation as the result of many conversations. Stop trying to build a soldier-facing app. And I say that still acknowledging that there is tremendous value in a data ecosystem, right? And that having it all ingested into the same place, analyzed effectively, helping drive or inform decisions depending on which approach you prefer. But I worry that, like, it's easy to make an app. It is hard to make an app that people are going to voluntarily use, right? And a lot of people in this room voluntarily use some human performance apps, and those have been built on the back of millions of dollars of investment of great teams of engineers and developers building something that is carefully designed to make you enjoy the process of using it, to make it intrinsically interesting to you. I think we should probably not attempt to replicate that through government systems. Anybody who's built inside like approved government systems probably knows it's not good for making things that are enjoyable to use that people voluntarily go to. And I will also caution people that just because high performers voluntarily use a thing does not mean that mandatory use of it by lower performers is going to turn them into high performers, right? I think that's all I really need in this one. I will throw out that if we wanted to do a lot of the like data collection, wearable enabled kind of stuff, my dream vision for that is a closet full of every different kind of wearable, and soldiers can come to the performance team and select which one they want for the low price of a few pieces of their data, right? And they continue to use that device in the commercially available app that is associated with it. They have just agreed, in order to receive that device, that some of that data is going to flow into a backend data system that is facing the performance professionals, not the individual user.
That's good. Well done.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'm going to let Alex talk more on this one because we ran, well, first of all, this kind of goes without saying, right? But we ran a survey on the different platforms that we used not too long ago. And the question was exactly this, like, what's worse, a bad strength coach or no strength coach? And it's not that we were going after coaches. You could have done this with any profession, right? But like you mentioned, this is sort of the most forward-facing piece of all this. 1,000 people responded, over 1,000 people. Granted, it's very biased, right? Follow us. 88% would rather have no strength coach at all than a bad strength coach, which, again, I'll turn it over to him because there's like a reason for that. 10 minutes.
I do think this is a chance to revisit the like how we treat coaches in this system. I think the fact that the coaches largely are not here or would have had to take PTO to be here, while a lot of people got funded to be here, says a lot about like where coaches fit into our ecosystem and how well we take care of them. And I think how well we take care of our people will determine how well they take care of the mission. This is the slide where I explicitly make a reference to Apex Path. I think there are lots of frustrations around that, but one thing I think we do need to do is understand why certain senior leaders are drawn to it or like it, and maybe we should learn from them what they are doing that is attracting the interest of those senior leaders.
Nazareth Syndrome.
And part of it is Nazareth Syndrome, and part of it is like paying coaches enough that you get good ones and then keep them, right? I think that's fairly straightforward, and I think it's easy, and you see it on like LinkedIn and social media and stuff, to blame the companies that employ the contractors. I think if you want to get a contract right, it requires the customer to write the correct contract to get the product they are looking for. That's a hard process to do, and it requires iteration. But hopefully we can learn a little bit from programs that have gone before us and work through some of that, or learn a little bit from mistakes we have made in the process. We'll keep it on side, but I think quality over quantity is important in this one. Creating some kind of incentive for higher quality or more experience. I also think paying the people that work for us a living wage is important.
But I mean, I think too, sorry, this is like off the cuff, right? But everybody that listens to our podcast knows I don't like conferences. I'm happy to be here with you guys, but go back to the other slide. The other data, right? Like, we're here to talk about data, and all we ever talk about is data, but it's the people in these programs that determine success or failure. And to Alex's point, none of the schedule really focuses on the people. I don't know what that would look like, and this is not a knock on whoever like organized all of this, but it's sort of a thought, right? To give our employees, give the folks that worked in these programs a voice to elevate some of these concerns, instead of kind of sitting here and discussing all of the good news stories of the data that we're generating, right? Totally off the cuff. If that gets me in trouble, I'm sorry. It felt relevant. You're up now.
Okay, I already pissed off a couple people in the room. We'll piss off some different people in the room. I get it. At a strategic global headquarters, you're dealing with like one size fits all kind of stuff that you have to apply across the force. In the case of facilities, you're dealing with Corps of Engineer standards, all that kind of stuff. But I went and looked just to make sure, and in the literal first paragraph of FM 7-22, it describes a cultural shift from the industrial scale approaches of the past. It refers to no more one-size-fits-all approaches. I would be careful that we don't accidentally slip into just a different industrial scale approach or a different one-size-fits-all approach. We got a lot of people with coaching backgrounds in the room. I would suggest that units with different missions, located in different climates, led by program directors and coaches with different coaching philosophies, all of those things would lead to different facilities, different equipment, different training models, different approaches. And I think that is not only okay, but to be encouraged.
We got to go fast. Yeah, I mean, this is the last slide, right? Until we get to sort of the contact us stuff. I don't know if I have any closing thoughts necessarily, other than to address the reality of what this says, right? Failure to adapt goes both ways. We are positioned in a unique space where we get a lot of hate mail from like staff. We also get a lot of hate mail from soldiers, and they're usually mad at each other, right? For the soldiers, it's the staff's fault that the thing isn't working. For the staff, the soldiers don't get it. Like, what are we even doing? The truth is, like, it sounds so cheesy, right? But we're all on the same team. And if the system isn't moving forward, it's like everybody needs to take a look at why that is. Like, I think the cultural shift in the military, accepting outside subject matter experts coming on board to sort of propel things forward. At the same time, coaches recognizing that you're not dealing with football players in camouflage, right? You have to be able to adapt the things that you've learned and known from all the different places that you've been to extend that level of expertise to typically a new paradigm. It's a new population. And so because we see this like play out all the time on social media, we just wanted to make sure that we address, like, we're kind of all at fault at the end of the day. Or we get all correct about it.
My only closing thought is that there's a reason that the combination of Drew's perspective from a coaching background and my background have complemented each other. There's a reason we did that. Yes, the Army does need to adapt a little bit, or the military does need to adapt to the culture that comes with the performance program, like accepting the role of coaches. being willing to like learn something from them and not keep doing things the way we've always done it. But like equally true, coaches also need to adjust to the Army. People who are coming and bringing in a civilian perspective or a sport perspective or whatever it is need to be just as adaptable. Drew will talk about path dependency as much as you want, whenever you want to talk about it. But there are reasons for why the Army does certain things. And like if you took away the Army, the coaches wouldn't have a program. If you took away the coaches, the Army would still be Armying. So it's worth taking the time to learn why things are done that way if you're going to integrate with that culture.
So, honestly, we wanted this to be sort of a back and forth discussion with you guys. I realized one, there's a lot, and we two, we're short on time. So I guess if anybody has any questions, or you want to like tell us what you don't like about us, that's fine too. If there's a, that's fair.
What do you mean by Mops and Moes?
That's a him question. He started on this whole thing.
Mops and Moes stands for measures of performance and measures of effectiveness. Measures of performance are how well you are performing the tasks you are executing. Measures of effectiveness is whether the tasks you are executing are actually getting you closer to your desired end state. Because even if you execute the wrong task perfectly, it might not achieve the outcome you were looking for.
So data gives a lot of things that are alluring. They're like building quantified things. And it also generates a lot of things that make fun, make revenue, which is enticing as well. How do we draw attention to things that are a little less tangible, a little more nebulous, like spiritual domains, when you can't quantify it and it's going to generate some profit?
That's like the $1 million question. The first thought that comes to my mind is Newton Chang is speaking. Are you in here? Yeah, what's up, man? He's talking later. We had him on from Google forever ago. He's been on a couple of times. And I think it was me that asked him, like, I was very interested in how Google justifies the existence of these things, right? Because in the H2F world, it feels like weekly, if not quarterly, it's like you're justifying your existence and it comes down to that. And his answer, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, right? But they just trust their work. And I recognize the like irony of we do have to produce return on investment metrics. I get that. I don't want that to be the take home message, but recognizing the squishy human element in all of this is going to fundamentally change the way that I think organizations like the Army receive information from programs like this. It's not going to lend itself to spreadsheets and PowerPoints and pictures and graphs. It's more of a conversational discussion, in my opinion.
And Newton, I'm glad you're here. Everybody should go to Newton's talk later. I do have a question to make sure I get this right, though. I believe after Newton told us that they don't measure those things, he said that just if they could measure it, the thing they would measure would be meaningful social connections. Am I getting that one right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the thing I would chase, right? That's the thing that makes people like remember the relationship, the impact, the value, and start caring about it.
So I think the question then becomes, how do you package that into a wearable, right? And I know it's tongue in cheek, but it's also true. Like, because at the end of the day, that's what soldiers want. They want to feel like they belong. And I don't know if we always nail that when we chase AFT scores or return to duty rates. Those things are important. So again, like I said, do you like me? That is kind of more important.
So if I may, good afternoon to everyone. In regards to implementables, if I present something to someone, right, the phrase is, I use the right tool for the right job.
Yes.
Is it just me or is it way too often? There's the wrong individual standing in front of your formation that nobody wants to listen to. I see it time and time again to where, one individual who can get a group together and motivate them by way of magic was something, right? But that individual never saw how or ever utilized it.
Yeah, they have to want to receive your message. It's important.
Sorry, I broke the slides.
One more or done?
So that's it.
4 seconds. Yeah, just give us the no. All right, we're out.
Thanks, guys.